You ever witness something so petty, so outrageously bold, that you genuinely don't know whether to laugh, scream, or just stand there in stunned silence? That's where I was tightening the final bolt on a 6-foot wooden fence that now split our once shared lakefront clean in two. Right down the dock, across the grass, slicing through the water like a courtroom verdict written in cedar. Behind me, neighbors stood frozen jaws slack, clutching coffee cups mid-sip. Across the fence, Margaret, cousin to Victoria Harlow, our tyrannical HOA president, stood speechless. Her luxury lounge chairs and half-finished jet ski ramp. Now trapped on the wrong side of the fence. No one moved. No one spoke. And I didn't flinch. This wasn't just revenge. It was legal. Surgical. Justified. The silence cracked with one whispered question. What the hell happened? Buckle up. Because it started 5 years ago. "5 years ago, I bought my dream house in Willowbrook Estates. It wasn't the biggest on the block or the most luxurious, but it had something rare deeded lakefront access. A shared strip of sandy shoreline and a community dock nestled behind a row of peaceful homes. It was perfect. Every weekend, my daughter and I would head to the water. We'd swim, fish, laugh until sunset. That little stretch of lake wasn't just a view, it was part of our life. A rhythm, a ritual. The neighbors were kind, the HOA quiet, and summers felt like scenes from an old postcard. Back then, I couldn't have imagined needing to defend the lake, let alone fence it. But peace, as I learned, is temporary. And paradise. It's always one signature away from being hijacked. We didn't know it yet, but the storm was already moving in. And her name was Victoria Harlow. 6 months ago, everything changed. Victoria Harlow, 30 polished and terrifyingly ambitious, was elected president of our HOA. No one thought much of it at first. She smiled at block parties, handed out newsletters, and promised to revitalize community standards. We didn't realize she meant total control. Within weeks, new rules exploded into our mailboxes, lawn height restrictions, fines for wind chimes, even approval forms for flower types. It was laughable. Until the fines started arriving. She patrolled the neighborhood like a queen guarding her throne, armed with clipboards, binoculars, and an iron will. Then came the nepotism. Her brother-in-law became the official landscaping inspector, raking in HOA funds. Her childhood friend landed the pool contract. But we swallowed it, tolerated it, adapted, until her cousin arrived. And with Margaret's arrival, Victoria didn't just bend the rules. She shattered them. Margaret arrived with rolling suitcases and an attitude like royalty returning to her estate. She wasn't a homeowner. She didn't live here. She was just Victoria's cousin visiting indefinitely. Within days, she turned the shared lakefront into her personal resort. Heavy-duty loungers, tiki torches, a blaring Bluetooth speaker. She even hired contractors to begin building a private jet ski ramp on our communal property. I stood there one morning stunned as she hammered stakes into the sand like she owned the damn lake. When I calmly introduced myself and reminded her the shoreline was shared, she didn't even look up. Just waved a crumpled paper in my face, a supposed easement reassignment, signed by the HOA. She smirked. Victoria gave me exclusive rights. You're only here on weekends anyway. And in that moment I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a hostile takeover, and it had just begun. That easement reassignment. Margaret waved at me. It looked official. HOA letterhead signatures, stamped dates. But something didn't sit right. I'm a contracts lawyer. I've seen enough shady paperwork to smell rot under perfume. The document claimed that the HOA board had unanimously voted to grant Margaret exclusive access to the lakefront siting optimized community resource usage. Interesting, since 2 of those board members were out of state that week. One was hospitalized. There had been no vote, no notice, no meeting minutes, just ink on a lie. I asked for clarification at the next HOA meeting. Victoria didn't flinch. She doubled down, claimed the bylaws had been recently amended to grant her full control over waterfront decisions. Anyone who challenged the board would be fined $500 per day. And then she smiled. That smug, victorious smile. That was the moment I stopped being polite and started building my case. Victoria thought her bluff would scare me. She clearly didn't know who she was dealing with. I went home that night and opened 3 tabs: city planning records, county property deeds, and the original HOA charter documents most homeowners never bother to read. But I did, and I read everything. Line by line, I traced the boundaries, rights, and legal protections tied to my lot. Turns out the lakefront was deeded specifically to my property, not just shared use. It was mine. And the HOA. The charter explicitly stated they had 0 jurisdiction over deeded property lines. Any interference opened them to personal liability. Victoria's amendments weren't just illegal, they were laughable. I printed out every page, highlighted every clause, and built a file thick enough to crush a jet ski. And I waited, because I knew what was coming next. They weren't done testing me, but I was done staying quiet. The next Saturday morning, my daughter, 8 years old, swimsuit on towel in hand, ran down to the lake like she always did. It was her favorite part of the weekend, but this time she didn't make it past the torches. Margaret stepped in front of her arms, crossed sunglasses on like a villain out of a bad soap opera. "This is private property now," she said. "Go back to your yard." My daughter froze, her lip quivered. Then she turned and walked back silent, confused, crushed. I saw it from the porch. That moment, that was it. They could find me, lie, build whatever ridiculous tiki palace they wanted, but making my daughter feel like she didn't belong. Unforgivable. I didn't yell. I didn't storm over. Instead, I went inside, opened my file folder, and added one more label, "Final Straw." And from that moment on, I stopped reacting and started executing. I spent the next week not arguing, not posting on the neighborhood app, not banging on HOA doors. I did what I do best. I buried myself in paperwork: title deed, property survey, HOA bylaws, meeting records dating back 2 decades. I even submitted a public records request for city zoning overlays. I didn't eat much, barely slept. But every page I turned gave me more power. This wasn't going to be a petty shouting match across hedges. This was war. And my weapons ink, law, patience. What I found was airtight. The lakefront was deeded exclusively to my lot. No board, no easement, no executive order could change that without my consent. The HOA charter was clear they had no authority here, but if they tried, they'd be personally liable. I drafted the letter. Certified mail. 72-hour deadline. Clock ticking. Let's see how smug they were with the countdown. The letter hit their mailboxes Monday morning, certified, signed, time-stamped. 72 hours. Clear the lakefront, remove all personal property, or face legal action for trespassing and HOA charter violations. I expected resistance. I didn't expect a theater. By noon, Victoria was on my doorstep, Margaret in tow, along with a man in a wrinkled blazer and no business card, who she introduced as our legal counsel. He looked like he'd learned law from watching courtroom dramas on daytime TV. Victoria offered to waive my HOA dues for a year if I let it go. Margaret proposed a shared schedule. She'd get Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays. I could have Tuesdays and early Saturdays. The lawyer mumbled something about squatters' rights. I didn't raise my voice. I handed him a copy of the property deed and a highlighter. "You have 70 hours left." They left scoffing. But not before Margaret muttered, "You're making a big mistake." She was right, just not for me. Instead of backing off, Margaret escalated. By the next morning, her resort had doubled in size. A second speaker appeared, blasting music from sunrise to sundown. Guests, strangers to the neighborhood, started parking on lawns, dragging coolers and beer kegs down to the dock like it was spring break. Then came the construction. She began framing a permanent shade pavilion on my land. No permits, no permission. Just plywood, concrete posts, and audacity. She was daring me to act. Victoria, meanwhile, distributed another HOA bulletin claiming temporary structures on communal land are protected under neighborhood beautification guidelines. I read it twice. It wasn't just wrong, it was fabricated. Every word of it. And still, I didn't react publicly, because now the paper trail worked against them, and every overstep they made, it just made my case stronger. Let them build higher. It would all come crashing down. By Thursday, with the deadline expired and the lakefront looking like a beachfront frat party, I launched Phase 2. I hired a licensed surveyor. He arrived quietly at 7 a.m., coffee in hand, clipboard ready, and spent the day mapping every inch of my property. By noon, orange flags dotted the shoreline like landmines, each one a legal marker. Neighbors watched from porches, whispering. Turns out, the lakefront wasn't just shared. It was precisely divided. The survey proved it. Margaret's entire setup sprawled across both sides, hers and mine. She hadn't claimed more space. She'd claimed everything, and now I had data. Coordinates, measurements, GPS-tagged violations. No more debates, just facts. That night, I visited the hardware store and ordered what I needed. 50 feet of 6-foot fencing. Posts, concrete, screws. The clerk raised an eyebrow. "Where's this going?" he asked. I smiled. Right where the law says it can. By the next morning, the rumors had spread like wildfire. Is it true? Is David really building a fence? Down the lakefront, I didn't confirm or deny. I simply nodded and kept moving. The posts were delivered at sunrise. The fencing panels by mid-morning. By noon, a crew of 4 showed up in work boots and tool belts. Neighbors gathered like it was a live event. Phones came out. Photos snapped. Across the shore, Margaret stood on her deck, coffee mug in hand, trying to pretend she wasn't panicking. But her eyes never left the growing pile of lumber. Victoria didn't appear yet, but I knew she was watching. Probably from behind a curtain, planning some last-minute emergency order. Didn't matter, because the permits were filed. The survey was official. The documentation was ironclad. All that remained was wood willpower and one righteous straight line. Tomorrow, we'd break ground, and break their grip. At sunrise, the first post went in. Cold steel hammered into soil, guided by laser levels and the surveyor's precise markings. With each thud of the mallet, the neighborhood stirred. People came out in robes, slippers carrying coffee like popcorn. Phones rolled. Whispers flew. By 8 a.m., the first panel snapped into place, 6 feet tall, cedar clean as courtroom logic. Right down the center of the dock, right through Margaret's setup. Her coffee mug shattered as it hit the deck. She screamed my name. I didn't flinch. The crew kept working. Panel after panel, the wall rose, slicing through her tiki torches, cutting her jet ski ramp in half like a guillotine through entitlement. By noon, the lakefront was divided, legally, precisely, permanently. Margaret speechless. Victoria still absent. But her silence wouldn't last. The fence was up, the fuse was lit, and the real explosion was coming next. At exactly 12:37 p.m., she arrived. Victoria Harlow, bathrobe, foam curlers, sunglasses the size of satellite dishes, stormed down the path like a dictator late to her own coup. She was flanked by her legal advisor and 3 HOA board members looking more like an improv troupe than an enforcement body. Her voice hit the lake before she did. "This is vandalism, trespassing, emotional terrorism." She waved a rolled-up HOA newsletter like it was a warrant. "You can't just build something without board approval." I handed her the permit. Stamped. Approved. County signed. She blinked. "You violated the community spirit agreement," she barked. I handed her the survey. She scanned it, color draining. "You think this makes you right?" "No," I said. "The law does." Neighbors watched in stunned silence. Victoria had ruled unchecked for months. Now her kingdom had a border, and it was 6 feet tall. Victoria wasn't done. She called the police. 2 officers arrived, calm but curious. She pointed at the fence like it had personally insulted her ancestors. "This is harassment. He's targeting me." The officers reviewed the permit, the survey, the deed, then looked at me. "Looks legal to us." They left. Next, she called city code enforcement. Same result. No violations, no citations. Nothing they could act on. You could almost hear the fuse inside her snapping. Then came the flyers hand-delivered to every mailbox. Urgent. HOA, emergency, rogue, resident, endangering neighborhood unity. It backfired. Instead of outrage, the neighborhood chuckled. People started digging into Victoria's decisions, asking questions, comparing notes. Whispers turned to quiet rebellion. She tried to escalate further, reaching out to county offices, even a contact in City Hall. Maybe next she'd call the National Guard, but the truth was simple. Her power ended. At my fence line. With legal routes failing, they changed tactics. That night, someone knocked on my door at 1:12 a.m. No one was there, but my motion lights had been triggered. Footprints in the mulch. Cigarette butts near the side gate. The next morning, I found my backyard hose turned on, flooding the flower beds. The following night, someone shined a flashlight through my daughter's bedroom window. I called the police, filed reports, installed cameras. No faces, just shadows. Then the neighborhood app lit up. Anonymous accounts accusing me of fraud, past lawsuits, tax evasion. All fake, all conveniently timed. Margaret stopped waving hello. Victoria stopped pretending to smile. They were silent now, calculated. It wasn't about the lake anymore, it was personal, but they forgot one thing. I don't scare easy. They weren't pushing me back. They were pushing me to finish what I started. 2 days later, I stepped outside to find a wide, blackened patch across my lakeside grass. Dead. Burnt. Like acid had kissed the soil. At first, I thought it was drought, but the pattern was too precise, spilled in a straight line hugging Margaret's fence-side empire. I sent a soil sample to a lab. The results, glyphosate. Industrial-grade herbicide. Poured overnight. Margaret denied everything. "Maybe you just forgot to water," she smirked. Victoria, meanwhile, issued a notice through the HOA due to declining landscape maintenance. Portions of the lakefront would be reallocated for more responsible use. Translation: they kill your grass, then punish you for not mowing it. It wasn't just petty anymore. It was surgical, targeted, malicious, but also predictable. And every petty act they threw at me, I documented it, photographed it, archived it. They weren't just crossing lines anymore, they were burying themselves beneath them. That weekend, Margaret threw a lake appreciation bash. Loud music, inflatable floats, HOA, funded catering, even a DJ. Everyone was invited. Except me. Flyers were taped to mailboxes, celebrate our community, unity, not division, subtle. It wasn't about the lake, it was about isolating me. She even reached out to my closest neighbors, the Garcias, the Lewis's, people I'd shared BBQs and birthdays with. Some went. Out of obligation, curiosity. Others texted me afterward embarrassed. "She said you were suing the HOA. She told us you're trying to bankrupt the neighborhood. She said your fence violates federal code." I didn't respond, but I remembered every word. That night, as the party roared next door, I sat in silence with my daughter watching the dock lights flicker beyond the fence line. She asked, "Are we the bad guys?" I smiled softly. "No, sweetheart, we're just the ones who said no." I didn't crash their party. I printed flyers of my own, only 5 copies. Each one included my deed with the lakefront easement. The county survey stamped and notarized the HOA charter with the clause they hoped no one would read. I hand-delivered them to 5 key neighbors. No drama, just quiet knocks and folders labeled facts. By Tuesday, things started to shift. Tom Harrison retired. Judge approached me during his morning walk. I read everything he said. They're bluffing and breaking the law. Then Sarah Chen stopped by. Her flower garden had been bulldozed last month for a view enhancement project Victoria approved. She thought we wouldn't check. Sarah said, eyes narrowed. She was wrong. The tide was turning, not with shouting, not with fences, but with truth. And once people start looking closer at power, they don't unsee corruption. They start asking, what else is she hiding? By Friday, the whispers became voices. A group of neighbors requested a special HOA meeting without Victoria present. They cited irregularities, misuse of funds, and an alarming lack of transparency. That same day, I received a manila envelope slid under my door. Inside, anonymously copied HOA financial records, highlighted transactions, overpayments to preferred vendors, unexplained reimbursements to Victoria, and a payment labeled Consulting Margaret. She was on the payroll, unofficially, unapproved, illegally. Margaret's husband showed up later that evening, red-eyed, quiet. He looked at the fence at the chaos his wife had built and muttered, "I told her this would blow up." Then he began dismantling her tiki setup silently. One torch at a time, the neighbors watched. Not one offered to help. Victoria's empire was crumbling, not with a bang, but with a long, slow unravel, and tomorrow we were calling the question. Saturday evening, community clubhouse, packed, every chair filled, neighbors standing along walls, phones recording. Victoria arrived late, flanked by her loyalists, but their eyes said it all. They knew. Tom Harrison, calm as ever, opened the floor. He read from the HOA charter, any board member found misusing funds or violating deed restrictions shall be subject to removal by majority vote. Victoria scoffed. You can't vote me out. I am the board. Sarah Chen stood. No, Victoria. We are. Then came the documents. Projected on screen bank statements, fake vote records, even Margaret's consulting fee receipts. Gasps, murmurs. One board member left the room. Victoria tried to interrupt, yelled fraud, fabrication, conspiracy. But no one believed her anymore. We passed around ballots. Pens scratched paper like thunder. Then the count, unanimous. Victoria Harlow was officially removed as HOA president. The room didn't cheer. It exhaled. Victoria didn't leave with grace. She stood trembling, part rage, part disbelief, and pointed a shaking finger at the room. You're all going to regret this. I gave this neighborhood order. No one responded. She stormed out, slamming the clubhouse door behind her. Margaret wasn't far behind, dragging a plastic bin of deflated pool floats like it held her crown jewels. But this wasn't over. Not for me. Because after the meeting, the new interim board approached me. They had questions, documents, concerns. Victoria hadn't just bent the rules, she'd buried them. Diversions from the landscaping budget, falsified vote logs, HOA funds rerouted through third-party vendors connected to her inner circle. They asked if I'd testify. I said yes. Not for revenge, for restoration, for accountability. This started with offense, but now it was about something bigger, making sure she could never do this again. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with the new board's attorney. We combed through every receipt, every email, every HOA document Victoria had ever touched. Turns out, her entire presidency was built on smoke and signatures, bogus contracts, inflated invoices, emergency votes that never happened signed by people who had moved away or passed away. Margaret's so-called easement reassignment completely unenforceable. And worse, funded using HOA money filed under community engagement. The board filed an official complaint with the county. Then came the audit. The numbers didn't just not add up. They screamed. Nearly $47,000 had vanished under Victoria's watch. She hadn't just broken bylaws. She'd broken the law. Formal charges were filed: fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. And suddenly that smug smile she wore all summer vanished like tiki smoke in the wind. This time, it wasn't just neighbors watching. It was the state, 3 months later, Victoria Harlow stood before a judge. No sunglasses, no clipboard. Just a blazer 2 sizes too big and a face drained of fire. I took the stand. Calm, precise, unshaken. I laid out the timeline, the forged documents, the financial misappropriation, the intimidation tactics, the lies. Others followed Tom Sarah, even Margaret's husband. Piece by piece, her empire of manipulation collapsed under oath. Her defense. She claimed it was all misunderstood delegation. The judge wasn't amused. Delegation, he said, doesn't mean deception. The verdict, guilty. Victoria was sentenced to 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and ordered to pay $47,000 in restitution to the HOA. As the gavel fell, she finally broke shoulders, hunched, eyes glassy. The woman who once ruled with fines and fear was now just another name in a court file. Justice at last had a spine and a voice. Margaret didn't wait for the dust to settle. The day after the verdict, a moving truck backed into her driveway. No goodbye, no apology, just silence. And boxes. She didn't make eye contact as she passed the fence one last time, half of her jet ski ramp still awkwardly leaning across the boundary like a forgotten monument to arrogance. Her husband loaded the last chair, muttered never again, and they were gone. No one waved. No one missed them. The tiki torches went out, the speakers went quiet. The dock, once cluttered and chaotic, stood open and clean again. Neighbors started returning to the lake. Kids laughed. Dogs splashed. It was like someone lifted a pressure lid off the whole community. No more fines, no more fear, just peace. Funny how something as simple as a fence could restore so much. But truth is, it wasn't just a fence, it was a boundary and a warning. Some mornings now I sit at the edge of the dock, coffee in hand, breeze on my face. The fence stands tall beside me. Silent, unmoving, not a wall of spite, a line of clarity. My daughter joins me sometimes. She's back to swimming, back to laughing. The sparkle in her eyes isn't dimmed anymore. The neighbors nod when they pass. Some stop to chat, others just smile. We don't talk about Victoria much, not because we've forgotten, but because we've healed. The lake is quiet again, not just in sound, but in spirit. No more shadow games, no more secret meetings, just people and peace and the slow return of trust. The truth, I didn't build that fence out of anger. I built it out of necessity, out of love, for my home, for my daughter, for the line that should have never been crossed. People still ask me, was it worth it? All the meetings, the legal fees, the sleepless nights, the sideways glances, the silence before the storm. I don't hesitate. Yes, every second of it, because this was never just about lake access. It was about standing your ground when no one else will, about drawing a line, literally, when power forgets its limits. I didn't win because I yelled louder. I won because I knew what was right and I refused to let fear rewrite the rules. Victoria underestimated one thing, quiet resolve. She thought calm meant weakness. She was wrong. Strength isn't in force, it's in boundaries. It's in knowing when to say enough, not with rage, but with certainty. I didn't build a fence to shut people out. I built it to show where respect begins and where entitlement ends. Victoria once told me no one ever questions the board. That was her flaw. She believed authority was automatic, that titles made her untouchable. But power without accountability. It crumbles. Publicly, painfully. She didn't just lose her position. She lost the respect she weaponized. The illusion of control. And Margaret, she didn't just pack her things, she packed her pride. Left behind a trail of dead grass, rusted screws, and a reputation no moving truck could carry. Their legacy, a cautionary tale, not just for HOAs, for any system where ego outweighs ethics. And me, I'm not the villain they painted, not the rogue neighbor or troublemaker. I'm a father, a homeowner, a man who simply refused to be pushed 1 inch further. This fence wasn't built from bitterness, it was built from principle. Because sometimes the most powerful word in any battle is no. It's strange, really, how something so simple, so unremarkable as a fence could become a symbol, not of division, but of resistance, of limits, of balance, of dignity. It still stands there, each post rooted deeper than just concrete and soil. It's planted in memory now, in meaning. Sometimes I run my hand along the grain of the wood and remember everything: Margaret's smirk, Victoria's threats, my daughter's tears, the morning silence, the courtroom echo, the gavel, and then I remember the laughter returning, the water rippling, my daughter splashing again like nothing ever happened. The world didn't change because I shouted. It changed because I didn't back down. This was never about revenge. It was never about pride. It was about choosing to draw a line when no one else would. And now, that line isn't just on the ground. It's part of who I am, and it's not going anywhere. Where the fence ends, stories begin. Maybe you've never built a fence like mine. Maybe your battles didn't involve docks or neighborhood tyrants. But if you've ever been pushed to the edge, forced to draw a line, not in anger, but in quiet defiance, then this story is already part of you. Because justice doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in the form of stillness, in documents, in patience, in the courage to say, "This far, no further." If watching Victoria's empire unravel gave you even a flicker of relief, of satisfaction, of hope, then welcome. You're among people who've also had to stand their ground. Tap that like button if you believe boundaries matter. Subscribe if you believe silence doesn't mean surrender. And in the comments, tell me your line. Where did you draw it? Who tried to erase it? Let's talk. Let's remember. Let's stand together. Because quiet people, we don't stay quiet forever.